The letter arrived on a night when the wind howled like a chorus of starving wolves. Elias Corvin had been alone in his study, poring over crumbling parchment maps and half-legible Latin manuscripts when the knock came. It was too deliberate to be the wind rattling the shutters. 3 slow, heavy strikes that seemed to vibrate through the bones of his cottage. When he opened the door, there was no messenger. Only a small, black-sealed envelope lay on the step, weighted by a coin, the size of his palm. The coin was tarnished silver, engraved with a strange crest. A crowned raven perched on a crumbling tower. Elias carried it inside, feeling the air in the room turn colder as he broke the seal. The handwriting was sharp and angular, yet oddly elegant. To Elias Corvin, the Keeper of Secrets requests your immediate presence at Eldergloom Keep. Time wanes, the veil thins. Your blood is the key. There was no date, no signature save for the title, the Keeper of Secrets. At the bottom, faintly visible as though burned into the paper, was a sigil identical to the crest on the coin. Eldergloom Keep. The name was a whisper from his childhood, a ruin spoken of in the same breath as ghost stories and cautionary tales. Some said it had sunk into the forest centuries ago, swallowed by creeping vines and poisoned earth. Others claimed the keep was cursed, that it had been abandoned after the last lord vanished on a moonless night. Elias's obsession with medieval arcana had taken him to forgotten monasteries and charred libraries, but never here. Perhaps because he'd always sensed the stories carried more truth than anyone dared admit. And now, here it was, calling to him. He set out at dawn. The forest surrounding Eldergloom was not like others. Its trees grew too close together. Their limbs gnarled and twisted like skeletal hands. Mist clung stubbornly to the ground, even as sunlight pierced through in pale spears. Crows followed him in unnatural numbers, their cries echoing until they sounded almost human. The path was little more than a strip of cracked stones swallowed by moss. But the deeper he went, the more he felt, guided as if some unseen thread drew him forward. By the time he caught the first glimpse of the keep, his breath was visible in the cold air, despite it being late summer. Eldergloom rose out of the mist like the carcass of a long-dead beast. Jagged spires, ivy-choked battlements, and stone walls slick with centuries of rain. The courtyard gates yawned open as though expecting him. Inside, silence reigned. The courtyard's cracked flagstones were overrun with weeds and tufts of moss. Benches lay half-collapsed, their wood swollen with rot. Vines crawled up the walls, their roots pushing between the stones like veins. Elias's eyes traced the main entrance, an arched doorway flanked by 2 gargoyle statues, their faces worn smooth by time. As he approached, a flicker of movement caught his attention. From the shadows of the doorway, a figure emerged. He was tall but stooped with age, his frame hidden beneath a heavy hooded robe of dark, threadbare fabric. What little light touched him revealed a long white beard and weathered hands that looked as though they had turned countless pages and mixed countless potions. "You have your grandfather's eyes," the old man said, voice deep and brittle like breaking parchment. Elias stiffened. "You knew him?" The hooded man nodded slowly. "I knew all the Corvins. I knew when the line began and when it nearly ended." He stepped forward, the smell of ancient candle wax and dust clinging to him. "I am Morkant, the last, Keeper of Secrets, and I have been waiting for you." Inside the keep, darkness pressed close, broken only by the flicker of lanterns. Elias followed Morkant through narrow corridors lined with shelves of books so old their titles had faded to nothing. Each step echoed faintly, as though the stones remembered every footfall from centuries past. "You were summoned because the veil is weakening," Morkant said without turning. "When it fails, the hollow ones will come. And this time, they will not be stopped by my power alone. The veil? Elias asked. Morkin's voice was low, almost reverent. A barrier between our world and the world that hungers for it. Your bloodline was bound to its keeping. You, Elias, are the last who can hold it shut. The words hung in the air, too. Heavy to dismiss as superstition, Morkin led him to a small chamber lit only by a single candle. A heavy wooden table sat in the center, scattered with maps, scraps of parchment, and strange crystal fragments. In the corner, a locked iron-bound chest seemed to hum faintly. "You will have questions," Morkin said, settling into a high-backed chair. "But tonight you will rest. Tomorrow you will see the Hall of Echoes, and you will understand." Elias lay awake long after he was shown to his room. The keep's stones groaned faintly, as if shifting in their sleep. Somewhere far below, water dripped in slow, uneven beats, and then footsteps. Not the soft shuffle of Morkin's tread, but something quicker, lighter. They moved across the courtyard below his window, stopping directly beneath him. Elias leaned out, scanning the mist. No one. And yet, his eyes caught on the main gate. A single bloody handprint marked the wood, its fingers long and claw-like. The mist swirled once, and it was gone. Dawn came reluctantly to Eldergloom. The pale light that crept through Elias's narrow window did not brighten the keep so much as make its shadows shift. When he stepped into the corridor, the air was cold enough for his breath to bloom white. Morkin was already waiting, standing at the far end of the hallway beside a tall iron door. "This way," he said, his voice a deep echo against the stones. "It's time you saw the Hall of Echoes." They descended a spiral staircase that seemed to sink far deeper than the keep's foundations should allow. The walls grew damp, and the air carried a faint hum, as though some distant choir sang in an unbroken note. Elias's hand brushed the wall and pulled away damp, glistening with some mineral sheen. Finally, the stairs ended in a narrow passage. Morkin pressed his palm against the stone and whispered a phrase in a language Elias couldn't place, something old and fluid, each syllable carrying weight. The stone shifted with a grinding sigh, revealing a tall arched doorway. The Hall of Echoes was unlike anything Elias had imagined. The chamber stretched into darkness, lit only by the ghostly blue glow of crystalline sconces mounted along the walls. Rows of towering bookshelves lined the space, each one warped with age. Yet the books they held looked untouched by dust or decay. The air itself seemed to thrum. Every time Elias moved, faint whispers rose from the shelves, as if the books themselves spoke in hushed tones. Morkin gestured toward them. "Every word ever bound here remembers being written. The hall holds knowledge too dangerous for the mortal world, yet too important to be destroyed." Elias ran his fingers along the spine of a massive black tome. Its leather cover was cold, as ice. Morkin guided him to a long table at the center of the room. Laid out upon, it was a manuscript. Unlike any other, its pages a thin, silvery material that caught the light in strange ways. The script inside shifted when he looked at it, like ink swirling underwater. "This," Morkin said, "is the Codex of the Veil. Your bloodline swore to guard it. Within are the spells that bind the veil closed." Elias turned a page, and his breath caught. The letters rearranged themselves before his eyes, forming words in his native tongue. "The veil is the skin between realms. Thin but unbroken, it holds back the hollow ones. Should the skin tear, they will pour through like smoke from a dying fire. Another page. Only the keeper may mend it, for the keeper's blood is the thread." Elias looked up sharply. "You're saying my family, my ancestors, were all keepers?" Morkin's gaze was heavy. "Yes, and the last keeper before me was your great-grandfather, Caldus Corvin." The name struck Elias like a hammer. He had grown up hearing half-tales of Caldus, a brilliant man who had vanished without explanation. Morkan's voice darkened. Caldus failed. The veil tore, if only for moments. It was enough for the Hollow Ones to touch this world. They did not cross in full, but the land felt their hunger. Entire villages vanished overnight. And to hide his shame, Caldus fled. Elias's jaw tightened. "And now you expect me to fix his mistake?" "I expect you," Morkan said, "to survive long enough to try." As they spoke, Elias noticed something strange about the codex. The words shifted again, this time forming not an explanation, but a warning. "They are awake." The whispers in the hall grew louder, a restless rustling. Somewhere beyond the shelves, a soft thud echoed, followed by a dragging sound. Morkan froze. "Stay here." He moved swiftly between the shelves, disappearing into the blue glow. Elias's curiosity overpowered his caution. He followed at a distance, weaving through the maze of towering shelves, the whispers growing louder until they felt like voices speaking directly into his ears. At the far end of the hall, the shelves widened into an alcove. Something stood there, tall and thin, its limbs too long for its body. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, hollow black pits where eyes should have been. The air around it seemed colder, as if it had stolen the warmth from the stones. Elias's breath caught. The creature turned toward him without moving its feet. Morkan stepped between them, his staff raised. The crystalline sconces flared with light, and the thing shrieked, not with sound, but with a pressure inside Elias's skull. It retreated into the shadows, vanishing like smoke. "That," Morkan said grimly, "was one of the Hollow Ones? A scout. The breach is growing." He led Elias back to the main table, his movements sharper now. "From this moment, you do not leave the keep alone. Do you understand? The forest is not safe. The courtyard is not safe. Only these walls still hold." That night, Elias returned to his chamber with the codex. He couldn't stop reading. The shifting words seemed to respond to his thoughts, answering unspoken questions. He read of the Hollow King, their leader, a being who had once walked the mortal world before being bound beyond the veil. He read of blood rites, of spells carved into stone and bone, of keepers who had willingly given their lives to mend the tear. But one passage caught his attention more than any other. When the last keeper fades, the next must be bound willingly. Refuse, and the veil will split like rotting cloth. Sometime past midnight, Elias heard it again. Footsteps. This time they were inside. Slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway toward his door. He stood, heart pounding, and opened it. But the hall was empty. Only the candle at the far end flickered, as though disturbed by a passing shape. He stepped back inside, and froze. The codex lay open on his table, though he was certain he had closed it. And across its silvered page was written a single phrase in dark, wet strokes: "They will come for you first." The next morning, the keep was shrouded in a heavy, unnatural fog. Even from the high windows of the library, Elias could see nothing of the forest, only a pale wall of mist pressing against the stone like a living thing. Morkan stood at the window, his gnarled hands resting on the sill. "They're here," he murmured. The first assaulty, sudden, thunderous boom rattled the shelves. It was followed by another, closer, the sound of something striking the outer walls. Elias ran to the courtyard, where the fog swirled in thick, roiling waves. Shapes moved within it, long-limbed and shuffling, their outlines barely human. The Hollow Ones had come. When the first broke through the mist, Elias felt the air drop in temperature so sharply his breath froze in front of him. Its skin was stretched, thin over bone, its mouth a black, gaping void. The creature's hand touched the stone wall, and frost spread outward in jagged veins. Morkan appeared beside him, staff raised. Light flared from its tip, a warm gold that pushed back the mist and sent the creature reeling with a bone-deep screech. "They will keep coming," Morgan said grimly, "until the breach is closed, or we are dead." The revelation in the library, Morgan slammed the codex onto the table. The pages fluttered on their own, settling on an illustration. A crystal heart suspended above a carved altar. "The heart of the veil," Morgan said. "The source of the Keeper's binding power. Without it, no spell can hold against the Hollow King." Elias scanned the text. The crystal had been sealed away centuries ago, hidden in the keep's highest spire to prevent enemies from reaching. The spire was guarded by the illusions of the veil, traps woven from the keeper's own fears. Morgan met Elias's gaze. "You must retrieve it. My strength wanes. I can hold the breach a while longer, but not without cost." The ascent, the climb to the spire, was treacherous. Narrow staircases twisted in impossible angles, and corridors that should have led upward looped back to their beginnings. Morgan's warning echoed in Elias's mind. "The illusions will come from within." The first came as a voice. It was his mother's, soft and pleading. "Elias, turn back. You'll die up there." When he ignored it, the shadows thickened into shapes, familiar ones. His great-grandfather, Caldus, stood in the hall ahead, eyes hollow, mouth whispering a stream of words Elias couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "You will fail, just as I did." Elias pressed on, forcing himself to see through the illusions. Each step felt heavier, as though the keep itself resisted him. The heart of the veil at last, he reached a chamber bathed in cold, pale light. In the center stood a pedestal of black stone, and upon it hovered the heart, a crystal of deep blue, its facets pulsing with light like a slow heartbeat. When Elias stepped closer, the air thickened. The walls melted into darkness, and from that darkness stepped a figure, a man cloaked in shadows, his face hidden beneath a crown of jagged bone. The Hollow King. "You carry the blood of the Keepers," the king said, his voice like the grinding of stone. "Bind yourself to me, and I will spare your world." Elias gripped the pedestal. "I've heard your bargains. You leave nothing but ruin." The king's skeletal hand reached toward the heart. "Then you will watch as I take what is mine." The struggle, Elias seized the heart. The moment his fingers touched it, searing light burst from the crystal, burning away the darkness around them. The Hollow King recoiled, but his shadowy claws raked across Elias's arm, leaving a line of frostbitten skin. Pain lanced through him, but he held on. The light grew, shattering the illusion, and when Elias opened his eyes, he was back in the spire chamber, the crystal warm in his hands. The breach opens by the time he descended. The keep was under siege. The courtyard swarmed with hollow ones, their clawed hands scraping at the walls. Above, the sky was splitting open, a jagged wound revealing a churning void beyond at its center. The Hollow King began to emerge in full, his massive form unfurling like a shadow-given flesh. Morgan staggered toward Elias, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "The breach, I cannot hold it. You must take my place." Elias looked at the heart, its light reflecting in his eyes. "Then we finish this." Cliffhanger, the Hollow King's gaze locked on him. "Come, Keeper," he said, spreading his head. "Arms wide. Seal the veil, if you dare." And with that, the world seemed to tilt toward darkness. Asterisk, asterisk. The courtyard shook under the Hollow King's arrival. His form towered over the keep, a skeleton draped in blackened shadows, crowned with jagged bone. Each step he took split the ground, sending ripples of frost through the flagstones. The air tasted of iron and ash. Morgan stood before Elias, his staff trembling in his hands. "I can give you one chance," he rasped, "but it will cost me everything." Before Elias could speak, Morkan slammed his staff into the ground. A dome of golden light erupted around the keep, slowing the Hollow King's advance. But Elias saw the toll immediately. The old man's face turned ashen, his body bowing under the strain. The choice the heart of the veil pulsed in Elias's grip, warm yet unbearably heavy. The Codex's words echoed in his mind. When the last keeper fades, the next must be bound willingly. He understood now. To close the breach fully, the keeper's soul had to fuse with the veil forever. No leaving, no returning to the world outside. Elias! Morkan's voice cut through the roar of the Hollow King. If you hesitate, all is lost. The golden dome shattered under a single swing of the Hollow King's clawed arm. Darkness poured in, twisting into hollow ones that swarmed the courtyard. Elias fought through them, the heart blazing in his hand, its light searing the creatures to ash. The Hollow King descended upon him, a shadow blotting out the fractured sky. "You cannot win, little keeper," the king growled. "Your world is already mine." Elias thrust the heart forward. The light burst outward, striking the king's chest. But it was not enough. The shadows closed over it, dimming its glow. Morkan sacrificed with a cry that was half incantation. Morkan hurled himself at the Hollow King, his staff blazing. White-hot, the impact tore through the king's shadows, forcing him back toward the breach. But Morkan's body dissolved into streams of golden light, his essence pouring into the heart. The crystal flared brighter than the sun. Elias felt the surge of magic tear through him, and then the choice was no longer a choice at all. The binding Elias stepped into the center of the courtyard, raising the heart high. The Codex's final words rose unbidden to his lips, each one burning his throat as he spoke. "By blood, by bone, by breath, I bind the veil." The light exploded outward in a ring, scouring the courtyard clean of the hollow ones. The breach above howled, a sound that seemed to come from every direction at once, as the wound in the sky began to close. The Hollow King roared, his body collapsing into smoke that was pulled, screaming, back into the darkness. The last thing Elias saw of him was the glint of bone crown before it vanished. Aftermath silence fell. The mist began to fade, revealing the forest beyond, green and alive once more. The frost on the stones melted into clear water that pooled at Elias's feet, but Elias himself could not move. The heart's glow sank into his chest, threads of light weaving into his veins. He felt the world beyond the veil, endless, cold, hungry, pressing against him, and knew he was now its wall. The keep around him seemed to shift subtly, its stones standing taller, its shadows bending toward him in acknowledgement. Centuries later, travelers passing through the forest still speak of Eldergloom. On misty nights, they say, a hooded figure can be seen at the highest window, a faint blue light in his hands. Some claim he watches over the land. Others say he waits for the day the veil begins to tear again. And deep inside the keep, Codex of the Veil rests on its pedestal, its pages whispering softly to no one, except, perhaps, to the eternal keeper who listens.